Welcome to EnduringTechnologyPress.com. I'm Eric. And when it comes to saving money on the food that your family eats, one of the great ways to do that is to have your own meat grinder. And I've got a couple of the ones that I have here. The reason for that is a couple-fold. Number one, oftentimes you'll find that whole cuts of meat like roasts will go for significantly less than individual cuts. What I like to do here is I'll buy a roast, I'll cut it up into steaks. Even a stewing meat sometimes is cheaper to buy a whole roast. And then those parts that, while flavor adds a lot, while fat adds a lot of flavor to a cut, if you've got a lot of gristle in there or lower quality chunks within that larger roast, I just trim that off, toss it in a Ziploc in the freezer, and twice a year maybe, I'll pull that out, I'll grind it up, and you go from having something that, kids and even a lot of adults would rather leave on the plate for the dog or, to be scraped off for garbage. You go from having that waste product into having ground meat that you can make into hamburgers, into all sorts of other things. Really good way to preserve your resources. And you'll even find quite often that those whole cuts that have a lot more actual protein in them are cheaper than even things like sausages. And these make a great way to produce sausages. Go from that whole cuts of meat that you can be confident in. These are being produced. You know what goes into them. You know the cleanliness of your grinders. All of that, take care of that yourself. Get a great recipe book for making sausages and make sausages with these. You'll find that they all more or less come with a large coarse plate and a much smaller fine grind plate. Sausage stuffing attachments. This one here comes with, it's a Kitchener number 12. It's my powered one. It comes with fine, coarse, and one that's open so that you can just force the material through without regrinding it into that sausage stuffing tube. And using a grinder for sausage stuffing not only conserves your resources because you don't have to buy a stuffer, but unless you have one of those nice crank ones, I've tried the arm lever one, they suck. They'll frustrate you, the material squeezes back up past that piston, it's such a loose fit, it's a piece of junk. These, much better, and you've already got all the kit. Now, this is a number 32 hand one, and I upgraded from a much smaller, probably about a number 12 hand one that my grandmother had. I bought this. This was about 30 bucks. Really decent price. And as long as you're willing to bolt this down to a heavy surface, because it does take a considerable amount of work to crank it out, you'll turn out meat in volume that does a great job. These also come with a pulley, and in hindsight, they weren't available with a pulley at the time that I got this one on sale. If I'd had it with a pulley and been, processing massive quantities, I would have gone for the one with the pulley and put on a 1 horsepower, 220 volt motor that you can pick up at Harbor Freight. Mount that on a solid base, and you have a bulletproof meat grinding system that'll last forever. You'll find the replacement parts. These are from Princess Auto in Canada, but all sorts of places have them. Really cheap. You buy a couple of the plates, buy a couple of the grinders, put them aside, and you'll have them. You can also get the sausage stuffing tubes that same way. Really simple to take apart, disassemble. You've got the really coarse auger in there. Really easy to do. This Kitchener number 12, powered. It's a pretty good one. If you were going to process loads and loads of meat, I'd say get out one with a stronger motor. This one advertises 400 watts. You might want one with a little bit heavier duty. This isn't a super light duty. I'd say it's mid-range duty for what an average family would use. Now, to give you an idea of what I've done, I've ground up all that meat scraps that I'll retain when I'm cutting up the meat that we're using as family. We hunt, so that gets ground up, whatever pieces don't make a nice cut. That gets ground. Quite often we'll find turkey coming on at a super discount, anywhere from 77 to certainly under $1, as that loss leader that the stores like to have you come in on. And that's what prompted me to get this electric one. It was actually a gift from my parents. They asked me what I wanted for Christmas one year, and I said, well, I had like 16 turkeys in my freezer that I picked up at 77 cents a pound, and I ground a massive amount of turkey that year, and it's gone a long way. Now, so what did I do there with that strategy? Well, it wasn't the scraps. I bought the whole cuts. I bought the whole turkey. What I did was take the breasts off. Those are lovely big chunks of meat. That made do instead of having turkey or chicken breast. That was my poultry breast for the year and a bit. Wrap those up in really good butcher paper. If you're getting any of these, also get a couple big rolls of the waxed or the plastic inside coated butcher paper. You need that if you're going to be putting away your own stuff. So took that off, then took off the rest of the meat that I could reasonably without going to too much effort, and I ground all of that. So there was, in one session, there was a massive amount of turkey that was processed through here. That was all pressed into, seasoned, pressed into patties for hamburgers. Turkey's kind of bland, even though it's really cheap. So if you're not flavoring it, it's great for tacos, where you're using the seasonings in there. If you're using it for spaghetti, I like using my homemade salsa to add just a little bit more flavor to that. Not commonly in our household used alone. A lot of Thai dishes and stuff like that where we use chicken that doesn't have a whole lot of flavor anyway. Ground turkey goes well there. So the easy parts that I could pull off those carcasses were ground. Then I took the remaining skeleton with still quite a bit of meat hanging to it. Got some of my extra large pots, and I boiled up those carcasses, cooled them off, stripped off all the meat, recycled the bones, but all the rest I went then and I had a really hearty turkey stock that I pressure canned up. So especially if you've got a pressure canner, and you can check out my review for my huge pressure canner. I loved it, did that job really quickly. So together that system effectively paid for itself in one session in the amount of money that I saved grinding turkey over other ground meats, as well as saving those turkey breasts instead of chicken breasts, and then making up loads of soup stock, that all of which come in really handy to have in your deep freeze. They're going to go a long way. They make meal prep so much easier. So these are two systems to consider. This one's certainly much more bulletproof than this one. This one has the added advantage that it's got the motor, and it makes life a little bit easier. If you're going to be processing massive amounts, I get something like this number 32 with the pulley, get a really good 1 horsepower motor, hook it up, and you'll have something that'll last forever. This one, it'll probably last for an average family for all you're ever going to do with it. There's ones now that I see that are advertised as a little bit more heavy duty. Maybe I'd tend towards going with that if it wasn't a price burden. But as a first price point, you might even, if you're strapped for cash, just go with the hand-mounted number 32. I wouldn't bother with the smaller hand-mounted one unless you are smaller and don't want to put the effort into it. This one does require quite a bit of weight and effort put into driving around. So for more on these grinders, how I use them to save a whole lot of money, and other things to empower your independence, follow the link into the show notes below and go to the EnduringTechnologyPress.com website. Thanks.